The rain pounded the roof like a metronome for nerves, steady and loud, as if warning me with every beat. The kitchen reeked of sawdust, fresh paint, and something I didn't want to name. He stood just inches away from me, his arm resting on the half-installed countertop, the corner of his shirt smeared with caulk. The light flickered above us, casting shadows that made everything seem more intimate than it was, or maybe exactly as intimate as it had become. His voice was low, barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the storm. "You keep looking at me like that," he said. "You know it's not helping." "I'm not looking at you," I lied. He leaned just slightly forward, and I didn't move. We both paused, hovering between impulse and disaster, the hum of the refrigerator and the crack of thunder making the silence louder. And then, before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: do you agree that everyone deserves a second chance after cheating? I never expected to let anyone into our home, much less into my mind. But everything shifted the morning my husband came home from work with a proposition and a smile I'd seen less and less lately. The faucet had been leaking for weeks, the floor tiles lifting from heat and age, and Thanksgiving was around the corner. He asked if I'd be okay with his brother coming to stay for a few days to help with the renovations. "He's between jobs anyway," he said. "And you know how good he is with his hands." I said yes. I wish I'd said no. By noon the next day, the front door swung open, bringing in the scent of pine from the morning rain and the energy of a man I hadn't seen in years. His voice was the same, low and easy, still laced with that confident humor that made people lean in just to hear it better. "Hope you haven't ruined the kitchen too badly," he teased, walking in with a duffel over his shoulder and a Dunkin' Donuts bag in his hand. "Brought bribes." He placed the box on the table with a wink. My husband laughed and pulled him in for a hug, a real one, the kind they hadn't shared since their mother's funeral 3 years ago. For a moment, the house felt warmer. Then the moment passed. He moved into the guest room, right down the hall from ours. I heard his suitcase thump against the wall, the soft whir of him unpacking. My husband returned to the hospital by 3 p.m. He was on double shifts again, someone had quit, or maybe been fired, I stopped keeping track. By 4:15, the power drill was buzzing in the kitchen. I found him on the floor, prying up old boards with sweat on his brow and a pencil tucked behind his ear. "You didn't have to start today," I said, handing him a bottle of water. "I had nothing better to do," he replied. "And I like fixing things." I told myself he meant the floor. The next 2 days passed in a blur of errands, wet shoes, morning coffee brewed stronger than I preferred, and scattered hardware receipts. We went to Home Depot twice. He drove. I sat with crossed arms, trying not to notice how easily he filled the silence when my husband couldn't. He told stories I had never heard before, ones about their teenage summers in Ohio, reckless car rides, stolen beers, the first girl he ever kissed behind a roller rink in Dayton. I laughed too hard at one of them. He noticed. I looked out the window. The tension between us was still subtle, nothing spoken, but undeniable. Like a door barely cracked open, just enough to feel the draft. On the third evening, the sky turned gray too quickly. He was beneath the sink when the thunder clapped so hard I dropped a glass. He shot up, knocking his head, and we both laughed, too long, too loud. It echoed in the empty space, bounced off unfinished cabinets and new grout. Then his voice softened. "This place feels different." "How so?" "Like a home someone forgot to live in." I didn't answer. That night, I lay awake as my husband snored softly beside me. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the day in reverse. I couldn't remember the last thing my husband had said that wasn't about work, bills, or our aging dog. I hated myself for noticing that. I hated myself more for wondering what he would say if he knew I noticed. The next morning, I found him on the porch, sipping coffee in a hoodie and pajama pants, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up, smiled like he'd been waiting. "Kroger's having a sale on paint," he said. "I thought we already picked a color." "I changed my mind," he grinned. We drove there in silence. On the way back, he asked if I ever missed being surprised. I didn't respond. Back home, I avoided the kitchen. But the kitchen didn't avoid me. By that evening, I was handing him a level while he leaned over the newly installed backsplash. He asked me to hold it steady. I did. Then he stepped closer to align a tile. Too close. I held my breath. He glanced sideways. "I could leave," he said. I whispered, "No." The next moment passed in a blur of heartbeats and bad choices. And before I could even process it, we were interrupted. The door creaked open. My husband's voice boomed from the hallway. "Hey, I think I left my badge here." We jumped apart, not physically, because nothing had happened, not really, but mentally, the separation felt brutal. Like a sudden gust of wind slamming a window shut. He walked in, smiling, oblivious. "I thought you were working till 10, I said. "They called in someone else." "Lucky, huh?" He kissed me on the cheek. I flinched just slightly, but enough. I felt it. I think he did too. That night, we sat at dinner like strangers. The soup cooled too fast. The room felt colder. And then the doorbell rang. It was our neighbor, holding a small black flash drive. "Caught something weird on my motion sensor cam last night," he said. "Thought you might want to see." The flash drive stayed on the kitchen counter like a threat neither of us wanted to touch. My husband hadn't opened it yet. He'd dropped it next to the bowl of keys and walked off like it was nothing, saying he'd check it later. But I saw how his eyes lingered on it before he went to the living room. He didn't trust what he might find, and I didn't trust how long he'd resist. The rest of the evening spun around normalcy we were both trying too hard to fake. He turned on the game, cracked open a beer, asked about dinner without really caring what I said. I chopped vegetables without looking up, praying the tension in the air wouldn't snap. He kept glancing toward the flash drive, and I knew it wasn't a question of if, only when. Meanwhile, the man in the guest room was humming. Actually humming. I could hear him through the vent, tinkering with something in the garage. That sound infuriated me more than I could explain. There was something so unbothered about it, so unaware or too aware. I couldn't tell which made it worse. The next morning began with storm clouds so heavy they swallowed the light whole. Rain streaked across the windows, flooding the street and soaking the edges of our doormat. The perfect excuse for staying indoors. He took it. They both did. By 9, all three of us were trapped in the same house. I baked. Not out of peace, but panic. My hands moved automatically, flour, sugar, cinnamon. I didn't need muffins, but I needed a distraction. They were in the kitchen together when I came in with the tray. My husband stood beside the fridge, checking messages. His brother leaned against the counter, sipping from a mug I hadn't seen before. It had my initials on it. "It's just a mug," he said softly as I stared. I didn't respond. I placed the tray down, offered muffins to both of them, and turned to unload the dishwasher. They talked. About caulk. About tiles. About whether the ceiling fan in the dining room made a weird clicking noise or not. My husband insisted it didn't. His brother said, "Well, you're not here enough to notice." I felt the air change instantly. "I mean because of work," he added. My husband didn't answer. Just took a muffin and walked off. A few hours later, My husband left to meet a contractor friend about getting rid of a mold spot in the basement. The irony of fixing one thing while the rest was quietly unraveling wasn't lost on me. As soon as his truck pulled out of the driveway, the house changed shape. It felt louder, though nothing made sound. I stood by the sink, rinsing dishes already clean. He appeared behind me, barefoot on the tile, silent. "We should talk," he said. "No," I said. He stepped back. "I can't be in this house with you and pretend we're strangers." "You are a stranger." He laughed once, no humor in it. "Then why do you keep looking at me like I'm not?" I turned off the faucet and wiped my hands. "Because you're in my house. You're in every room. You're under every word I don't say. I can leave." "Then leave." He didn't move. "I don't want to be the reason you break something that still works," he added. "It's not working," I said, finally. "It hasn't for a long time." The silence after that was enormous. Bigger than the house. We went to Home Depot again that afternoon, another run for more grout and sealant. The storm had passed by then, and the roads shimmered with water under a moody sky. He drove. I watched his hands on the wheel. We didn't speak. I don't know what we were listening to on the radio. I just remember hearing our breathing. Inside the store, we moved like two people pretending to shop, like we belonged to separate lives. I stood by a row of white tiles. He held up two kinds of adhesive. I nodded, not even seeing what he was holding. Then we turned into the plumbing aisle at the same time, reached for the same wrench, and laughed, too loud, too sudden. A woman passing by gave us a curious glance. I dropped my hand immediately. Back home, he went straight to work on the backsplash. I helped without thinking, handing tools, wiping stray smears of grout from the wall. The afternoon sun hit his face at a certain angle that made me feel like I was standing in a different timeline. One where I hadn't met my husband first. The radio played an old song from our college days. I didn't even realize I was humming it under my breath until he joined in. "That song always reminds me of that one party," he said. "The one where you wore that awful blue scarf and got mad when someone spilled beer on it." I loved that scarf. "It was ugly," he smiled. I laughed. "You were worse." "I still am." That was the moment. The one that started and ended everything in the same breath. We kissed. Afterward, I turned away immediately, brushing the dust off my hands like that would undo what just happened. My mind spiraled. I imagined the flash drive sitting on the counter, imagined my husband watching it at that exact moment, imagined the walls of this house collapsing inward from all the pressure we were burying beneath the drywall. "I need to pick up the dry cleaning," I blurted. "You don't even wear dry clean stuff," he replied. "Then I'll start." I grabbed my coat and my bag and left the house without knowing where I was going. I drove. Through familiar streets that didn't feel familiar anymore. Past the high school where we met. Past the gas station where I used to buy snacks before late shifts. Past everything I thought was mine. When I returned, it was dark. My husband was in the kitchen, alone. I froze at the threshold. The room smelled like fresh paint and cinnamon. He was holding something in his hand. I couldn't see what. "I watched it," he said. I didn't move. I watched the whole thing. My mouth went dry. "The flash drive?" "No," he said, turning slowly. "The security footage from the neighbor?" "It was corrupted. Wouldn't open." He stepped closer. "I watched you. All day." My knees almost buckled. "What are you talking about?" He pointed to the chair. On it lay a small leather-bound notebook. Mine. I didn't even realize it was missing. Page 47, he said. You wrote something about a smell, pine and paint. That's today. Right? My entire body pulsed with heat. You read my journal? He didn't answer. And then, just like that, he smiled. I think you forgot who you married, he said softly. That's when he walked away, leaving the notebook behind. The last thing I saw before the door closed behind him was the corner of the page, dog-eared, marked, open wide. The next morning began with a silence that felt too intentional. I woke up early, earlier than usual, not because of an alarm or the dog or the smell of coffee, but because the air in the house felt like it had stopped breathing. My husband wasn't in bed. The guest room door was shut. The hallway lights were still off. And yet, I could feel that both of them were awake. Like all three of us were waiting on someone else to make the first move. I walked into the kitchen. The flash drive was gone. On the table, my journal still sat exactly as he'd left it, open to page 47, the dog-eared corner casting a shadow over the words I had no intention of rereading. I closed it gently and tucked it away into a drawer, though I knew it was already too late. That drawer might as well have been transparent. I heard movement from the living room. My husband stepped in from the porch, holding a mug that wasn't his. It was the one with my initials again. He saw my eyes land on it and offered a dry explanation. Only one that was clean. No reply came to my lips. None would have helped. By the time he left for work, it was nearly 9. Late for him. But he didn't seem to care. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even say he was leaving. I just heard the front door open, then shut again, and the tires back out of the driveway. I found him, his brother, outside by the shed, sorting through a bag of tools with one hand and eating a granola bar with the other. He looked like nothing had changed. Or like everything had, and he'd already accepted it. You're up early, he said without looking at me. Couldn't sleep, I replied. I guess that makes 2 of us. There was a beat of silence, then another. I didn't know he read it, I said finally. My journal. He paused mid-movement. He didn't tell me he did. He didn't have to. He tossed the wrench into a bucket and dusted off his hands. Look, we don't need to keep spiraling in this circle. I didn't answer. He walked past me toward the house, brushing by without so much as a glance, as if I were just part of the landscape. That afternoon, I drove to the local nursery for a pumpkin. It was late October, and the front porch still sat bare, like we were afraid to welcome the season. I chose one that was oddly shaped, too heavy on one side, a strange dent on the other. The cashier made a joke about how it had character. I smiled politely and nodded. Driving back, I passed by the same small diner we'd gone to in our first year of marriage. The paint was peeling now. The sign buzzed erratically. I didn't stop. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. His truck, the brother's, wasn't there. And neither was my husband's, which made sense. But his brother hadn't said anything about leaving. Inside, the kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and sawdust. The backsplash was fully installed. The sink was fixed. Everything looked whole. It made me feel broken. I found a note on the counter. Scrawled on the back of a Lowe's receipt. Needed more grout. Be back soon. But hours passed. The sun started dipping behind the trees. The house creaked with evening fatigue, and still no one came back. I paced, then sat, then stood again. I checked my phone 5 times. Nothing. No texts. No missed calls. No notifications at all. Like no one was thinking about me at all. I heard the front door just before 7. My heart jumped. But it was only my husband. He walked in, dropped his keys, and opened the fridge. Nothing. He looked around like he expected someone to greet him. I stayed in the doorway. "Where's your brother?" I asked. He closed the fridge slowly. "You tell me." I frowned. He said he went out for grout. He leaned against the counter and folded his arms. "You're still lying." "I'm not." He shook his head, smiling in that empty way people do when they're done expecting honesty. "I'm not playing this game anymore," he said, grabbing a bottle of water and heading toward the living room. I followed. "You think I know where he is?" "I don't think anything anymore. I just wait to be proven wrong." His words stuck to the walls like humidity. I didn't follow him further. I went upstairs instead. I stared at the guest room door. Still closed. I opened it. The room was neat. Bed made. Floor swept. Closet empty. His bag was gone. I turned and went back downstairs, heartbeat climbing my throat. My husband sat watching TV like nothing had changed. "He left," I said. He didn't look at me. "Maybe you should too." I opened my mouth, then closed it. No point. The next morning, I found his truck parked a few blocks down, outside a rundown motel. It was still raining. I pulled into the lot and just sat there, watching the room window. A light flickered inside. A shape moved. I didn't knock. I didn't go in. I just waited. He finally came out around noon, a duffel slung over his shoulder, looking like he hadn't slept. He saw my car and froze. Then approached slowly. "You followed me?" he asked. "No," I said. "I guessed." He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, you guessed right." There was a pause. Wind rustled the flag outside the office. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. He glanced down. "You came here for a reason." "I don't know what I came for." "Well, I do." He dropped his bag. Looked me in the eye. We kissed. Neither of us said anything after that. He walked around the car and opened the door. I didn't stop him. We drove for hours. Nowhere special. Just roads neither of us had ever taken. It felt like escaping without actually leaving. We stopped at a gas station off the highway. I went in to use the restroom. When I came out, he was sitting on the curb, sipping a Coke. He looked at me. I sat beside him. We kissed. We drove back in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, something felt different. The house looked untouched but unfamiliar. I stepped out, heart pounding. Then I saw it. The neighbor. He stood on his lawn, arms folded, watching. And beside him, my husband. Talking. Laughing. Like nothing was wrong at all. They were laughing. From the car, I watched my husband and the neighbor standing near the edge of the yard, sipping something from red Solo cups, talking like they were old college friends. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the posture, the lightness in my husband's shoulders, the way his head tilted back when he laughed, was unmistakable. It was comfort. Familiarity. Nothing about it matched the undercurrent I'd been drowning in for days. I didn't move. My hands stayed locked on the steering wheel, my body glued to the seat. He had no idea I was back. Neither of them did. And for a moment, I wondered what would happen if I just kept driving. Past the street. Past the city. Past every version of myself that had built a life around expectations. Instead, I opened the door. The sound caught their attention. Both turned toward me. My husband raised his cup slightly, like a toast. The neighbor smiled politely and stepped away toward his own house. "You're back early," my husband said. "Yeah. Everything okay?" I nodded. "Fine." He looked at me, really looked this time, like he was waiting for something I hadn't said. When it didn't come, he drained the last of his drink and motioned toward the house. "You hungry?" Inside, the kitchen was spotless. The scent of lemon cleaner still lingered from earlier, and the overhead lights were too bright for late afternoon. He opened the fridge, scanned it, then closed it again. "I was thinking we could order Chinese," he said. I gave a non-committal hum and walked upstairs. I needed air, space, silence, none of which existed within those walls. I changed into an old sweatshirt, the kind I used to sleep in during cold months, and sat at the edge of the bed. Outside the window, I could see the neighbor's driveway. Empty now. The red glow of the evening sun washed everything in an eerie stillness, like the entire street was holding its breath. A knock came at the door. "I'm ordering," my husband said from the hallway. "General Tso's or orange chicken?" "Doesn't matter. You used to be picky about that." I didn't answer. He sighed and disappeared back downstairs. I stayed in the bedroom until the food arrived. The smell eventually drew me out: ginger, garlic, sesame. The comfort of habit. We ate in silence at the dining table, the muted television casting blue shadows over our plates. I picked at my rice more than I ate it. He finally spoke. "I think we should invite everyone over for Thanksgiving this year." "It's been a while." I froze mid-bite. "Your sister, her husband, the kids. Maybe even mine. We can make the turkey together like we used to." Like we used to. The words clanged against my ribs like a warning bell. I nodded slowly, unsure what agreement even meant anymore. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the darkened hallway barefoot, pausing outside the guest room door. Still closed. Still empty. I pushed it open gently. The bed was made. No bags. No signs of him. I sat down on the edge and stared at the space he'd occupied. And then, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't know who I was anymore without the noise. The next morning came too fast. He was already dressed and downstairs, pacing while on the phone with someone from work. I poured coffee and left it untouched. Every sip felt like pretending. By midday, he announced he was going to visit his brother. "Just to clear the air," he said. I blinked. "You know where he is?" "Of course I do." He said it so casually I nearly dropped my mug. "I thought you didn't." "I said I was watching," he cut in. "I never said I didn't know." He picked up his keys and kissed my cheek. My whole body stiffened. Then he left. I stood in the doorway long after his car disappeared down the street. That evening, I pulled down the Thanksgiving box from the attic. It smelled like dust and old cinnamon. Inside, all the things we hadn't used since before everything got quieter. Turkey-shaped salt shakers. A chipped ceramic pilgrim. Napkins from a forgotten autumn. I started setting the table. For no one. Half an hour later, headlights washed across the windows. I looked up. But it wasn't my husband. It was him. He stepped out of the truck slowly, carefully, holding a small brown paper bag in one hand. I opened the door before he knocked. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He nodded. "I know. I just needed to return something." He held up the bag. I took it without looking inside. "I didn't tell him," he said quietly. "If you're wondering." I'm not. He looked over my shoulder toward the dining room. Setting up early? It's the only thing I know how to do. Neither of us moved. The wind picked up slightly, pushing a few leaves across the porch. He stepped back, one foot on the stair. I'm leaving town, he said. Tomorrow morning. Where? He shrugged. Somewhere that doesn't look like this. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I stood frozen in the doorway until the sound of his truck faded completely. Then I opened the bag. Inside was a small, beaten envelope. My name written in pencil. No return address. And a photo. Not of us. But of him. And my husband. Younger. Happier. Standing in front of this very house. And on the back, written in the same familiar hand. He was always yours first. I didn't sleep that night. Because in that single sentence, I realized something that made my skin crawl. They weren't just brothers. They had secrets too. And I had no idea what I'd stepped into. I didn't go back inside right away. I stood on the porch for what felt like forever, holding the envelope in my hands as if it weighed more than it did. The photo inside kept flashing in my mind like a memory I wasn't part of, even though I was standing on the very porch where it had been taken. The way they looked in that picture, my husband and his brother, arms over each other's shoulders, faces sunlit and stupid with youth, felt like a clue I wasn't smart enough to interpret. Or maybe I was just afraid to admit I had no idea what kind of story I'd walked into. When I finally stepped inside, the house was too quiet. The kitchen still smelled like reheated Chinese takeout. One light was on in the hallway. My fingers trembled as I tucked the photo back into the envelope and dropped it inside the drawer beneath the microwave. I closed it slowly. As if doing it fast might trigger something I didn't want to face. I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with a blanket over my legs and the TV playing old sitcom reruns I wasn't watching. Around 3 in the morning, I heard my husband's car pull in. The headlights briefly lit up the living room wall before vanishing. A moment later, the front door opened. He didn't seem surprised to see me awake. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, then sat across from me on the armchair we always fought over during football season. "You didn't come to bed," he said. "No." He nodded. "That's fair." I waited for more, but he just sat there, staring ahead. Like he had something in his mouth he didn't want to spit out. I tried to keep my breathing steady. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the fridge. "I saw him," he said finally. "Today." He didn't say much. "Did he mention the photo?" He looked at me. "You saw it?" I nodded. "Yeah." He mentioned it. More silence. "Why'd he give it to you?" my husband asked. I shook my head. "I don't know." Another nod. Then he said, "He always wanted to be me." It wasn't a boast. It wasn't a judgment. Just a strange, quiet observation. Then he stood up, placed the empty glass in the sink, and disappeared into the bedroom. By the time the sun rose, I was still on the couch, half dreaming, half analyzing every word, every glance, every missed cue from the last few weeks. Or maybe months. That morning passed in a blur. He left early. I didn't ask where he was going. I didn't care. I went through the motions, coffee, laundry, sweeping floors that didn't need sweeping. I opened the envelope again just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. The same picture. Same handwriting. Same weight in my chest. That afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't him. It was my sister-in-law. His brother's ex-wife. She stood on the porch in jeans and a windbreaker, clutching a folded umbrella in one hand and a skeptical look in the other. "I was just in town," she said. "Thought I'd drop by." I let her in, even though my instinct screamed not to. We sat at the table. I offered tea. She declined. She didn't make small talk. Just got to it. "He told me you two have been spending time together." I didn't answer. She glanced around the kitchen. "Funny. I used to sit right there. When we still did Thanksgiving together. I remember." She leaned forward. "Did he say anything to you? About why he really came?" My stomach twisted. "To help with the kitchen." She gave a half smile. "Right. I don't know what you want me to say. I want to know if he told you about their agreement." I blinked. "What agreement?" She sat back, arms folded. "Of course. He didn't. Tell me." She looked at me like I was naive. Like she pitied me. "Years ago, when your husband got promoted and moved out here, his brother didn't just tag along. He asked to be brought with him. Said he wanted a new start. But there was a condition." "What kind of condition?" She shrugged. "That he'd stay out of trouble. That he wouldn't do what he always does." I shook my head, confused. "What does that mean?" She stood up. "It means he has a pattern. And you're not the first person he's done this with." Before I could ask anything else, she turned and walked out. I followed her to the door, stunned. "He said it wasn't like that," I called after her. She paused at the bottom of the steps. "He always says that." Then she left. I stood in the doorway, heart racing. Everything around me looked the same. The porch. The sky. The lawn. But I didn't trust any of it anymore. I went back inside and grabbed the envelope again. This time, I turned the photo over and held it to the light. There was something faint beneath the handwriting. A watermark maybe. Or maybe not. I held it closer. A date. Small. Faint. Almost erased. November 24th. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, on Thanksgiving. The same day my husband was called into emergency surgery and didn't make it to dinner until midnight. The same day his brother stayed behind to help me finish the turkey and keep the fire going. The same day I had written in my journal that I felt less alone than I'd expected. I hadn't remembered that part. But now, I couldn't forget. Because the photo wasn't just a memory. It was proof. And not just of them. But of me. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the house like I didn't belong in it. I kept circling the same 4 rooms, kitchen, living room, hallway, guest room, each one filled with air that no longer felt mine. The envelope was still tucked under the drawer where I'd left it. I didn't need to look again. I'd memorized everything. The date. The slant of the handwriting. The way they both smiled like they knew something I didn't. By the time I heard my husband's car pull into the driveway, the sun had already started to sink. I stood by the kitchen window, arms folded, heart loud. When he stepped inside, he didn't look at me right away. Just dropped his keys in the bowl and took off his jacket like it was any other Thursday. "I ran into your brother's ex today," I said. He paused at the fridge. "Did you?" "She said he has a pattern." He turned, slowly. "You believed her?" "I don't know what I believe." He stared for a beat. "Then we're even." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was worse, it was nothing. Like we'd both already used up every reaction we had left. He poured a glass of water and sat down at the dining table. I stood on the other side, still by the window, still gripping myself. I think you should tell me the truth, I said. He sipped his water. What truth are you looking for? You know which one. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled through his nose like someone who was about to open a door he'd boarded shut years ago. He wanted what I had. That's not new. You mean me. He didn't deny it. And the house. The job. The stability. He's always drifted. Never stuck around long enough for anything to grow under him. So yeah, when he saw I had something solid, he wanted a piece. You let him live with us. I didn't think he'd come after you too. The way he said it, quiet, resigned, sent a chill through me. He didn't come after me, I said. He raised his eyes. Then who started it? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Right, he nodded. He stood up, grabbed his glass, rinsed it in the sink. The clink of glass against porcelain sounded final. Then he walked past me toward the stairs. I'll be in the guest room tonight, he said without looking back. I stood there, long after he disappeared down the hallway, feeling like I'd just lost a war I never meant to start. That night, the house was too quiet again. No TV. No footsteps. No kitchen sounds. Just the occasional creak of wood expanding in the cold. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the bedroom, leaning against the wall like some stranger visiting my own life. In the early hours, before the sun came up, I heard the front door open. I moved fast, barefoot, breath held, careful not to make a sound. I reached the staircase just in time to see my husband stepping outside with a box in his hands. It wasn't packed tightly, just an assortment of items thrown together in a rush, a wrench, a pair of socks, a shaving kit, a roll of blue painter's tape. He walked it to the curb and placed it down next to the trash bin. Then he stood there, staring at it, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to throw it out or take it back inside. I stayed hidden. When he finally turned and walked back in, he didn't close the door all the way. He left it slightly ajar, as if on purpose. Or maybe he just didn't care. I waited until he went upstairs again. Then I slipped outside. I knelt by the box, fingers trembling. Inside, everything smelled faintly like citrus and cedar. His brother's cologne. A shirt. A receipt from a diner 3 towns over. I dug beneath it all until I found what I didn't expect, a notebook. Spiral-bound, half full, pages curled at the corners. And written on the first page, in my husband's handwriting. If I can't fix the house, at least I can fix the record. I sat down on the porch step and flipped through it. It wasn't a journal. It was a log. Dates. Notes. Observations. Repairs made. Things broken. Conversations remembered word for word. Including mine. Including his brother's. I wasn't just being watched. I was being studied. Each entry was clinical, detached. Like he'd separated himself from us long ago. There were no accusations, no emotions, just documentation. On one page, dated from last month, he'd written. She watches him when she thinks I'm not looking. She doesn't smile like that with me anymore. On another. He jokes too much when I'm around. He flinches when I touch her shoulder. Something changed. I flipped to the last page. If it was just about her, I could handle it. But it's about me. It always was. He's not here to love her, he's here to beat me. My throat closed. I returned the notebook, closed the box, and went back inside. The next morning, he was already gone. No note. No call. No clue where. The guest room was made, the bed smoothed over, every trace of him erased like he'd never stepped foot in it. But the front door had been left unlocked. I waited all day. I cooked. I cleaned. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I watched the driveway like it was a stage. Then, around 5 p.m., a familiar truck pulled in. But it wasn't my husband's. It was his brother's. He stepped out slowly, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. He walked up the path like someone who knew he was doing something stupid and couldn't stop anyway. He knocked once. I opened the door without a word. We stood there for a beat too long. "I'm leaving," he said. "I thought you already did." He shook his head. "Not for good. This time I am." I nodded. "I just came to say goodbye." I didn't move. "I never wanted to hurt you," he added. "You did anyway." He looked at me for a moment. Then down at the porch floor. "You don't have to forgive me. But you should know, I loved you." I didn't answer. He turned and walked back toward the truck. Then paused. "Oh," he added, reaching into his pocket. "He left this in my truck the last time we talked. I thought he'd come for it, but he never did." He held out a folded sheet of paper. I took it without unfolding it. Then he got in and drove away. I closed the door behind me and walked to the kitchen. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a ticket. One way. To Chicago. And the date? Tomorrow. 6:45 a.m. Terminal C. Underneath, scribbled in faint pencil. "Figure out what you want." The ticket stayed in my hand long after the truck disappeared down the street. I stood in the kitchen, the evening light stretching across the tile floor, fading everything into gold and shadow. A one-way to Chicago. My name not written anywhere on it, but somehow it was mine. I sat at the table, the paper between my fingers, and stared at nothing. It wasn't a decision yet, just a possibility. But even the weight of possibility can make a woman feel like the floor is shifting under her. My first instinct was to rip it in half. My second was to pack a bag. I didn't do either. Instead, I walked upstairs. The bedroom was still untouched from the morning. His side of the bed smooth. Mine messy. I opened the closet and ran my hand along the coats. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just confirmation that something here still felt like mine. At the very back, tucked between an old winter jacket and a pair of jeans 2 sizes too small, I found a photo album I hadn't opened in years. I brought it downstairs, sat on the floor, and flipped through it like it might offer an answer. It didn't. But it did remind me of who I used to be. I must have been sitting there for an hour when the front door opened. My husband walked in like he didn't expect anyone to be home. His eyes scanned the living room, then landed on me, cross-legged on the carpet with the album in my lap. He didn't say anything at first. Then, finally, "You found it." "I wasn't looking for it." He came closer, looked down at the open page Jess at Lake Erie, summer before last, a rare photo where we were both laughing, sunburnt and holding ice cream cones that were already melting. "You loved that trip," he said quietly. I nodded. So did I. He sat in the armchair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I didn't think it would get this far," he said. I didn't ask what this meant. We both knew. "I should have said something sooner," he added. "Before it got out of hand." "You did say something," I replied. "You said nothing." He nodded like he deserved that. Maybe he did. I stood up, closed the album, and placed it on the shelf. Then I pulled the ticket from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. His eyes flicked to it. He didn't touch it. I'm not asking you to go, he said. I just wanted you to think. I have. Then what are you thinking? That I don't know how to be in this house anymore. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. Instead, he stood, walked to the dining room, opened the side drawer, and pulled out a thin folder. He brought it over, set it down next to the ticket. I stared at it. What's that? He stepped back. Something I've been working on. I opened it. Inside were pages, not a journal, not a log. A plan. Budgets. Renovation estimates. A sketch of a new kitchen layout. Paint swatches. Ideas for redoing the living room. A list of things we'd said we'd do over the years and never had. I started it last winter, he said. After I thought we were done. I didn't know how to fix us. So I figured maybe I'd start with the house. I didn't speak. I traced my finger along a line that read, remove cabinet doors, open shelving idea from her Pinterest. There was something heartbreaking in the detail. In the quiet effort. The kind that comes when someone is trying, but not in the way you asked them to. I don't need you to stay out of guilt, he said. Or because you think you owe me something. I just needed you to know. I noticed. Even if I was too late. He walked upstairs without waiting for a reply. I stayed there for a long time. The house was still. But not empty. I didn't sleep. Instead, I packed a bag. Slowly. Deliberately. I didn't take much. Just the essentials. A book. A scarf. My wallet. No photos. No keepsakes. Nothing that tied me to this version of myself. At 4:30 a.m., I slipped out of the house. The sky was still black. The town still sleeping. I drove through the quiet streets like I was the last person left in the world. The airport was an hour away. Just enough time to think, but not enough to change my mind. By 6:10, I was standing in front of Terminal C, ticket in hand, bag on my shoulder, heart in my throat. I looked at the departure board. Chicago, on time. Then I sat down in the nearest chair and stared at the gate. Boarding began at 6:30. At 6:28, I stood up. At 6:29, I stepped forward. At 6:30, I turned around. I didn't get on the plane. I didn't go home either. Instead, I walked to the rental car counter and asked for something small and forgettable. Something that wouldn't get noticed. Then I drove. Out of the city. Past the suburbs. Through roads I didn't recognize, toward a future I hadn't planned. Around noon, I pulled off into a small town. Nothing remarkable. A diner. A gas station. A motel with an open sign flickering in the window. I parked. Went inside. Got a room. And then I sat at the edge of the bed with my bag still unopened and the blinds still drawn. There was no message from him. No call. No question. Just a quiet world. And then, just before sunset, I stepped outside. Walked across the street to a small cafe with plastic chairs and pie on the menu. I ordered coffee. Then I heard a voice behind me. You left. I turned. It was him. Not my husband. The other one. He looked tired. And unsure. I didn't expect to see you again, I said. I didn't expect you'd run. I looked down at the coffee. Then back at him. We spent night together. We didn't speak much the next morning. The sun had barely risen when I opened the curtains. The room felt colder than it was. He stirred beside me but didn't move. I sat quietly in the chair by the window, watching the parking lot fill with light. Nothing looked different, but everything was. At checkout, we didn't make eye contact. We didn't need to. We walked side by side to the car, the same quiet rhythm between us that had started months ago in my kitchen and now stretched across a motel parking lot in a town neither of us could name. He drove. I didn't ask where. After an hour, we stopped at a gas station. He filled the tank. I bought coffee. We sat in the car, windows down, wind rustling plastic signs for scratch-offs and hot dogs. It felt like a waiting room for a life I wasn't sure I'd stepped into on purpose. Around midday, we crossed into the next state. No border sign. Just a subtle change in the landscape, fewer billboards, longer stretches of nothing. I wanted to ask what we were doing. Where we were going. But I didn't. Neither did he. By early afternoon, we pulled into a quiet roadside diner. The kind with sun-faded umbrellas, plastic chairs, and laminated menus. The waitress brought us 2 glasses of water without asking. We ordered soup and sandwiches. Ate in silence. Halfway through his grilled cheese, he finally spoke. "I thought you'd go to Chicago." I stirred my soup. "I almost did." He nodded, staring at the salt shaker like it held answers. "I wasn't expecting you," I added. "I didn't know I was coming." More silence. The waitress returned with coffee. I sipped mine slowly, hands wrapped tight around the cup. He sat back, eyes tired, jaw clenched. Like he hadn't really slept in weeks. "I told him," he said finally. I didn't respond. The words settled between us like dust. "I told him everything. Before you left." I looked up. He held my gaze. He said he already knew. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. He said he forgave me years ago. Long before anything ever happened. I whispered, "Forgave you for what?" He didn't answer. Just looked away. We paid the check. Got back in the car. The drive home was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It was full. Tense. Electric. By dusk, we were pulling onto our street. I hadn't asked him to take me home. But somehow, he knew. The house looked the same. Porch light on. Curtains drawn. Wind chimes swaying gently in the breeze. The dogwood tree out front still clinging to its last yellow leaves. He stopped the car, engine still running. "You want me to walk you in?" he asked. "No." He nodded. "Okay." I opened the door, stepped out, and paused. I didn't look back. I walked up the steps. My key slid into the lock too easily, like the house hadn't even noticed I'd been gone. The hallway smelled like citrus and dust. A load of laundry hummed in the background. I set down my bag in the entryway and moved slowly through the house. Kitchen. Living room. Nothing out of place. Then I heard it. The soft click of a door upstairs. I followed the sound. Each step louder than the last. My heart beat like it was trying to warn me. At the top of the stairs, I saw the light under the bedroom door. I pushed it open. My husband stood inside, suitcase on the bed, half-packed. He turned when he heard me. We looked at each other like 2 strangers who recognized the same mistake. "I didn't know you'd come back," he said. "I wasn't sure I would." He nodded. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere." "Then why the suitcase?" He exhaled. "Because I needed to know if I could leave. Turns out I can't." I stepped into the room. He sat on the edge of the bed. "You left," he said. You told me to figure out what I wanted. Did you? I think I did. He didn't press. Didn't ask what the answer was. Then he said something I didn't expect. I saw the footage. I blinked. What? The neighbor's footage. I got it to play. I couldn't speak. It wasn't much. Just a moment. A look. One frame, maybe two. But I saw enough. My throat closed. I thought it would make everything clearer, he continued. But it didn't. Then why are you telling me now? Because you came back. I sat in the chair by the window. We stayed like that for a long time. Both of us breathing in the same room but not moving. Not bridging the gap. He stood finally, zipped up the suitcase, then opened it again and started unpacking. Shirt by shirt. Sweater by sweater. Deliberate. Controlled. When he was done, he closed the lid and slid it under the bed. I made dinner, he said. I followed him down to the kitchen. There were roasted vegetables, baked chicken, and a salad already dressed. Plates on the table. Forks lined up. Wine unopened. We ate quietly. Halfway through, I set down my fork. I'm not ready to explain what I want, I said. I'm not asking you to. But I need you to know. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of me. He nodded slowly. I just needed to see who I was when no one was watching. He looked at me. And who are you? I'm still figuring it out. He smiled. Not with his mouth. Just his eyes. We cleared the plates. Washed the dishes. No words. Later, when the house was quiet again, I walked into the guest room. Sat on the bed. Looked around at the half-finished renovation. The shelves he never got to hang. The patch of wall we never painted. On the desk was the envelope with the photo inside. I picked it up. Held it for a moment. Then I tore it in half. Not because it didn't matter. But because I didn't need the proof anymore. I stepped into the hallway. And there, at the bottom of the stairs, stood both of them. My husband. And his brother. Staring at each other. Waiting for me. And I didn't know who I had walked toward. Because I stopped in the middle. And I didn't move.